Stevie was a very happy child. He was such a good child. He was just a wonderful kid as he got older. And he loved sports. He loved soccer, he loved baseball, swimming. He always used to get the ribbons. He was always competing, and he was very active in sports. He was just a child that loved playing with the teams and stuff. So he was good at everything he did. I appreciate my son that he was never ever one of those little troublemakers.
Stevie was born a month before I turned 13, and one of my friend's mothers used to babysit him, so after school it was my job to go pick him up and bring him home. So I used to pretend like I was his mom. We'd be walking back home.
He was what, 5 pounds, I think it was, and he was a good little baby.
My brother was always a tease and always making people laugh. He loved kids, so the neighbor kid next door would always come over and he would catch baby lizards with them. And when my brother had passed, I remember his name was Adam, and Adam came over and he goes, "No more catching baby lizards." But that's the impact he had on people around him. He loved everybody. He made life interesting and he made life fun.
I met Steve on my very first day of patrol when I went solo to my first assignment. He himself was also a brand new officer. He was probably a couple months ahead of me. Steve was the type of officer, he was just extremely friendly. He had a sense of compassion, loved animals. He would always just make sure the animals were tended to. He cared about people. He treated everyone with respect, and he had a self-deprecating style of humor. He loved to laugh at himself as much as anyone.
He was a very helpful husband and a very good father and a very good son. He was beautiful. He was a beautiful person.
November of '94, I was 2 weeks off of FTO. I'd been on my own for 2 weeks, assigned to the Red Mountain Patrol Graveyard Squad, Steve's sister squad. That night, Steve and I were working 2 beats that are out east. There were only 2 beats out east at that time. Steve checked off on a traffic stop on the freeway, and I knew he was there by himself. I put the call I was going to on hold, and I headed over to back Steve up on a traffic stop. When I got there, Steve immediately put me at ease. Like I said, I was a little tense. I was a new officer. We called for a motor officer. Senior motor officer Dennis Slade came and showed up. I stayed until Dennis had given the alco sensor to the suspect, and then I checked with Steve and asked if there's anything else I can do to help him out. He said no, he was good. I then drove away, kind of drove over a little rise in the road, just outside the traffic stop, when I heard a very stress-filled radio traffic come out from Officer Slade. He put out that there was a 963 hit and run. The suspect was fleeing eastbound.
I was working the shift in November 1994. I worked swing shift in Central, and we became aware that one of our officers had possibly been killed. The car computers were different then, our computer system. We tried to get a hold of dispatch. Dispatch, understandably, wasn't answering the phone. And so we huddled in the station around a computer trying to figure out what had happened. And unfortunately, we figured out that Steve had been killed in a car crash out on the US 60.
You know, I had to think about it for a minute and realize that I'd just been there with these people. There was no meeting in the freeway at that time. I turned around and started going back westbound when I saw a vehicle fleeing eastbound with obvious front end damage. Turned back around, got behind that vehicle, and I was preparing to do a traffic stop when the vehicle started to speed up a little bit. I was getting ready to call a pursuit when the suspect came to an abrupt stop. I got out of the car with the driver of the vehicle at the same time. We made contact with each other, and he asked me if I was the cop that he'd hit, if I was okay. Because at that point I realized how important the call was that I was on. I realized that it had been Steve that had been hit.
I was at home in bed when I received a knock on the door from then another good friend of mine and my current sergeant at the time, and they basically came in and told me that Steve had been killed.
I remember hearing the news and running towards my living room and just hugging a pillow and thinking this isn't real.
Steve made the ultimate sacrifice, and that was an eye-opener for a lot of people. It was the first officer Mesa had lost in decades on duty, and again, it was an eye-opener for us. Sometimes we don't always go home.
Stevie was an individual just like anybody in the community. He was part of a family that misses him. He wasn't just a policeman. He was part of a family that lost him.
Steve, although he's very new, I always said he patrolled and conducted himself the right way. He delivered police service with a smile and with compassion. We deal with those who are often underprivileged and poverty-stricken, and Steve took to this calling with that in mind. And I would just say to anyone out there who's starting this career, especially those that are in the academy or brand new on FTO, Steve was not far removed from where you are. And when you're having that difficult day, when you're tired, when you're in a bad mood, just try and dig down deep and give it your all, give the best service you can. And what I say is try and police the Pollard way and in his memory.
What I remember the most about Steve from this call was just his personality. He was so laid back and so funny. I was a brand new nervous guy. I had that F5 45 stance, and I was yes sir, no sir. And he was just a laid back, good officer.
Had Steve been able to work much longer, I think his impact would have been even more significant.
What I want to get across to the new recruits, new patrol officers out there, you have been given some of the best training in the world. When you go through FTO, you're getting some of the best mentoring in the world. Have faith in yourself, trust in your training, trust in your mentorship, have confidence in yourself. You've been given that skill set. Have faith in yourself. You can handle that call, and you will be able to when it comes. All of us will be faced with that call.
It's a good reminder. It's not only good to remember Steve, but going forward to remember how important training is, how important it is to follow our procedures, how important it is to back each other up, to prevent something like this from happening again.
Your job is important, and what you're doing it because you want to serve others. You have to love your job. If you don't love your job, then you're in the wrong job.
It's a respectful occupation, and what you do with it is you do your best. You know, you're there to serve the community, but at the same time, don't forget that you need to take care of yourself also.
I just want to thank you, every single one of you, from the bottom all the way to the top, for everything that you do every year to honor Steve's memory, to take care of his family, to just keep the memories alive.
My brother was a good person to be remembered, and we're very thankful for all of you in the Mesa Police Department for remembering him. Thank you for everything you do for all of us.
Stephen was an officer that in today's environment, 2020, with everything that we've been going through, with not only the pandemic, but obviously civil unrest, the indictment of our profession all over the country, he is somebody who served with honor, dignity, and respect, not just of the community, but of his fellow officers. Stephen was a guy who would hold people accountable, but he's also the first one to stop and just talk to community members, have engagements and interactions with them, really make that connection to show the human being behind the badge. So I challenge you, what are you going to be? Are you going to uphold that legacy? Because that's who a Mesa Police Department officer is. That's who an officer in this community is. Doesn't matter if it's just Mesa Police, Chandler, Tempe, Gilbert. That's who you're supposed to be.
On guard, attention, present, arms.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled